The bottom bracket on my bike is completely destroyed. Listen to it. But why exactly is that? Well, let me tell you more about it and also tell you how you can avoid having this same issue. So what's actually going on here? Because this bike isn't actually that old, and I would have expected for the bottom bracket to have lasted a fair bit longer than it has. But in fairness, this bike has seen a lot of grit, mud and sand, plus the occasional jet wash. Yeah, pretty sorry about that. I've only got myself to blame. Anyway, the bottom bracket kind of needs replacing, so that is what I'm going to do. But this video isn't really specifically about the process of that, but more about sharing key information with you so that you can make your bottom bracket last longer and therefore save yourself a little bit of money. Tip number one, I feel like this is the most obvious, so let's have it first. Avoid blasting your bottom bracket with a jet wash, much like I did. You want to use a low-powered hose and then just some mild soapy water and a soft brush. Then you can rinse off any of the soap and it'll be good to go. If you blast water into it, it's just going to simply get into the bearings, sit there, corrode, and wear the bottom bracket out. Tip number two, we're on the non-drive side of the bike here. Now if you look, on the end, you've got the end cap bolt, which is designed to add preload into the bearings and remove any unnecessary play. You do the preload bolt up as loose as possible whilst ensuring that there's no free play in the bottom bracket. You do that before you do up these pinch bolts on the crank arm itself. Now it's important to remember here, because I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding of this. The preload cap on the end is not holding the crank in place. Once you do these two pinch bolts up, that's the bit that is securing it. Now, if you do this preload cap up far too tight, we're talking in the region of, say, anywhere from 3 Newton meters upwards, you're simply going to add additional drag and resistance into the bottom bracket and accelerate the rate at which it wears out. Tip number 3 is to use a reputable brand of bottom bracket bearing manufacturer or supplier. Don't be drawn into using unbranded stuff that appears to be really good value online and just seems to be just a fraction of the price, because more often than not, it's kind of like false economy and they don't tend to last. Also, it's worth mentioning, perhaps don't be drawn into the super expensive fancy pants ceramic bottom bracket bearings without being aware of the fact that they're not specifically a fit and forget item. And just because they're like 10 times the price doesn't necessarily mean they're going to last 10 times as long, because those high-end expensive bottom brackets will more often than not require regular servicing and cleaning to keep them running nice and slick. So if you are going to go for the expensive stuff, just bear in mind it's going to take more servicing and more caring rather than just using a reputable brand of bottom bracket that's going to be like fit and forget. It's going to last you a long time. And then tip number 4 is that if your bike has got any dust covers around the bottom bracket area, either directly underneath or where the back wheel sits, make sure they're actually in place, because they are going to help keep dirt out rather than allowing it to get into the inside of the frame, kind of like attack the bottom bracket from the inside out. This one's actually got one missing. Perhaps one of the contributing factors to why my bottom bracket sounds like this. Now, if you have lost some of these little dust covers, much like I have, you can just jump online, find the manufacturer of your bike, and normally they sell them as replacement parts that are like a few pounds, euros, or dollars. But if you can't get hold of the covers, you can always just get a little bit of tape it up, make it nice and smooth to keep the dirt out. But it's important to remember, especially on the covers underneath the bottom bracket, is they normally have a small little hole to allow any moisture to drain out. So yeah, just bear that in mind if you're going to take them up. Okay, so those are what I feel are perhaps the 4 most important tips and things you need to consider when thinking about extending the longevity of your bottom bracket. But there is one more important aspect which I think we need to consider, which is far, far less likely to be the cause of your problem, but could be something potentially quite serious. Now, if you are someone that finds yourself regularly replacing bottom brackets, I'm not just talking one every year, we're talking like one every couple of months, then clearly there is something that is causing this problem. You're not just unfortunate and you're wearing out bottom brackets. Now, in this instance, I'm going to say that there's 2 or 3 different factors that could be causing this, and unfortunately it's boiling down to around the manufacturing process of your frame. So the bottom bracket area, you've got 3 different areas that could be causing a problem. area number one. The bottom bracket hole may not be made to the correct tolerance. Now, when manufacturers are creating the frame, they have a very tight tolerance to work to, be that the hole for the bottom bracket could be ever so slightly larger or ever so slightly undersized. Now, if that tolerance is not adhered to correctly, the bottom bracket isn't going to sit correctly, and you could run into all sorts of problems. The second one could be that each different side of the bottom bracket is not quite aligned correctly with the other. So you could have one side perfectly straight and one side ever so slightly offset. And by doing that, it's going to put additional stress onto one of the sides of the bottom bracket and therefore wear it out quicker. And then the third and final thing in this area that could be causing you a problem is that the edge of the bottom bracket hasn't been faced correctly. And therefore, when the bottom bracket is either threaded or pressed into the frame, it's not quite sat flush, and therefore you're back in the same problem that one side could be straight, one side could be ever so slightly off, again causing premature and accelerated wear on the bottom bracket. Now, if you think this is one of the problems that you're facing, you're going to need to take your bike back to the bike shop and see an expert mechanic or an engineer to get this thing measured correctly. Now, most good quality bike shops should be able to do this, and also most good quality bike mechanics should be able to face your frame to make sure it's flush on the outside and the bottom bracket sits perpendicular with each other, and you should have no issues. So as I mentioned, facing is actually a relatively simple fix. It's more a case of like trying to take the paint off the frame and get that face nice and flush. Most bike shops can fix that out for you, but tolerance issues, unfortunately, are going to need to like go back to the manufacturer, more likely to be a warranty claim issue, which is a bit of a pain. I think we've got to agree on that, but they're unlikely to be the cause of your problem. Anyway, that's enough chat about bottom brackets. I got to admit, it's a fairly uninspiring subject to discuss, but an important one, because if you get it right, you're not going to have any issues like that happening too frequently. God, I don't want to spin it anymore, it's upsetting me. So I need to actually get on, change this bottom bracket out. I'm not going to show you the whole process of it because there's basically like a million bottom bracket standards, and I'm pretty sure we've probably got like 100 different videos on how to show you how to change a bottom bracket. I mean, if you're subscribed to GCNTech, you probably would have seen them already, so head over, check out those videos. And yeah, please do let me know in the comments section down below how long you tend to find a bottom bracket lasts for you, if there's a brand that you find works and lasts the longest. And yeah, as always, if you like to support what we do, subscribe, like this video, and share it far and wide with all your friends. I'm out of here. See you later.